Hey there, I'm Leebs, and on this channel, we take a weekly look at gaming news and gaming adjacent topics. This week was supposed to be a bit of a slower one coming off the heels of the Summer Game Fest, but Nintendo had other plans and sprung their June Nintendo Direct on us at the last minute. And speaking of that, we're going to kick things off with a brief TLDW of their showcase. If you're interested in everything that Nintendo showed off, I've got a full recap already live, so be sure to check that out. For now, here's a very quick and condensed look at some of the bigger announcements. Nintendo started the showcase off with a brand new Mario and Luigi game titled Brothership, which is not my favorite made-up word, but oh well. Fortunately, weird name aside, the game looks great. It's been 9 years since we've had a Mario and Luigi game, and I love seeing a modern visual take on the classic series. The game centers around flying your half-ship, half-island vessel, named the Ship-Shape Island, around the world of Concordia to explore, collect, and beat up all the bad guys. Mario and Luigi Brothership will be launching later this year on November 7th. Fantasian Neo Dimension is being released from Apple's exclusivity clutches soon, and if you're not familiar with this one, it was easily the best thing on Apple Arcade. Fantasian is an RPG created by Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi and musical mastermind Nobuo Uematsu, and you're not going to find a pedigree much better than that very often. Thankfully, it'll finally be coming to the rest of us this winter on PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and the Switch. One of the biggest announcements was for the next Zelda game, and for once calling it a Zelda game is even more correct than usual. In The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, you'll take control of the iconic princess and use the Tri-Rod to capture and recreate much of the game world's objects and enemies. You'll use objects like tables to climb up inaccessible areas and solve various puzzles, while summoning captured creatures to fight in your stead. My only complaint is that it's not called The Legend of Link Echoes of Wisdom. Oh well. Switch owners will be able to play the next installment of the Legendary series this September 26th. Here's one that got a lot of fans excited before turning around and angering quite a few as well. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection is a massive collection of 7 Marvel vs. Capcom fighting games. I already covered them all in my Nintendo Direct recap, but what's got some fans angry is the lack of an Xbox version of the collection, which is definitely a weird decision on Capcom's part. In fact, almost half of the multi-platform games announced at this Nintendo Direct excluded Xbox consoles from their releases, which is very interesting. Given Microsoft's focus on Game Pass while seeming to shift their focus away from their own console, I'm very curious to see how this plays out and if other developers also start to deprioritize the Xbox. But this isn't a Microsoft piece. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection is sure to make longtime fans happy, provided they're not Xbox owners, when it launches later this year on PC, PS4, PS5, and the Switch. And finally, the last announcement Nintendo released was a big one. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is alive and seems to be doing well now that its development is back in the hands of Retro Studio. Although the trailer didn't actually reveal very much, just seeing it at all after 7 years of silence is enough to easily make it a showstopper of an announcement for the Nintendo Showcase. Still, no concrete release date for this one just yet, but it's looking as if Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will finally be out sometime later next year, 2025. Moving away from Nintendo and onto the headline story this week, in my coverage of the big announcements at the Summer Game Fest, we touched on the reveal trailer for Dragon Age Veilguard, but I was mildly surprised to see the backlash at the reveal. However, when I dug into the totally balanced and not at all unhinged opinions on the internet, I realized what the problem was and found myself somewhat agreeing. If you go back and watch the original trailers for the previous 3 games, which I did because it has been a long-ass time since I've played them, it's immediately apparent that the new trailer doesn't fit the tone and style of the original 3. As a casual fan, I'd forgotten just how moody the first games were, so it's no surprise that the Veilguard trailer with its much lighter bar fight tone and Tarantino-esque companion reveals would anger longtime fans. In the original game, Dragon Age Origins, the original reveal trailer does a great job at setting the stage for the role that the player character will take, that of a Grey Warden, an ancient sect of protectors fighting against the Darkspawn. In Dragon Age 2, the entire reveal trailer shows a stand-in for the player character and an epic 1v1 fight with voiceovers talking about claiming one's destiny. Granted, it was less impactful than the original introduction, but it still gets the point across that you're going to be a total badass character and the focal point of the story. Dragon Age Inquisition also does a great job at setting the stage for the player to become the Inquisitor, the head honcho, the hotshot. In other words, all the original trailers focus on the player as the main person that can save the day. It plays into that power fantasy, that messiah fantasy almost. So who are you in Dragon Age Veilguard? Apparently you're just some random in a bar, I guess? Maybe there will be more of your backstory in the actual game, but yeah, the Veilguard cinematic trailer definitely didn't make me as excited to save the day once again as I thought it did when I put it into context. But this was all just the cinematic reveal, and although it may have let some of us down, the test is the gameplay itself, of course. Unfortunately for BioWare, fans seem equally split on not only the direction of the combat, but the overall art style as well, with the core criticisms being leveled at what some are calling uninspired visuals, boring character design, stale dialogue system, and weightless combat. In the lengthy gameplay reveal, you can see a handful of enemy types, some acrobatic rogue gameplay, a mini-boss encounter with a pride demon, and of course hints at the story to come. It's also clear that the game's more tactical origins, pun intended, are basically completely gone. This isn't surprising given that the series has been moving away from tactical combat ever since the first game. On top of that, the rise of action RPG's popularity thanks to FromSoft's iconic Souls franchise was no doubt taken into consideration during Veilguard's development. Now, the change to more actiony combat will please some and turn others off, but that's just the nature of these things. Games change, but what really seemed to turn longtime fans against Veilguard was just how not Dragon Age it felt. It's not as if the first 3 games didn't have their fair share of awkwardness. I mean, Lilani's song sequence is infamous at this point. But the casual banter of your companions during the gameplay showcase felt more like the most recent Marvel film's desperate attempt at quirky character building than a Dragon Age game. When you combine that with the more stylized art style and combat that looked like it was very lacking in impact, it's no wonder some longtime fans are upset. Personally, I'm going to wait until the game comes out to judge it, but I'd be lying if I said my excitement for Dragon Age's next outing hasn't diminished a bit after these reveals. But it is important to keep in mind that these games are dozens of hours long, so a glimpse at level 1 combat shouldn't count for too much. Fortunately, we won't have to wait too much longer to see if Veilguard is hiding a surprise, or if this reveal really did tell the full story. Dragon Age Veilguard is scheduled to release this fall on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. It's no secret that the games industry is going through a period of upheaval and readjustment thanks to a number of factors such as post-COVID restructuring, bloated AAA budgets, irresponsible and greedy C-suite decisions, and a change in gamer behavior just in general. While I'll choose to tackle some of these issues one-on-one, many of them are smaller topics that bear mentioning but aren't necessarily in need of going into deep detail. For those sorts of stories, I've created this segment we're just going to call the state of the industry. So here are a handful of stories that you may want to be aware of. Embracer Group, rapidly becoming one of the most hated names in the game industry, has once again closed yet another studio. This time, Pieces Interactive, most recently behind the Alone in the Dark remake, has announced it will close up shop after 17 years in the industry. Embracer Group reported that Alone in the Dark performed below expectations as the core reason behind the studio's closure. Of course, anyone that's followed the ridiculous Embracer Group saga of greed and incompetence likely saw this one coming. Even if Alone in the Dark had done moderately well, there's a good chance it still would have been axed to help make up for said greed and incompetence, but who's to know? In similar news, Galvanic Games, who most recently released Wizard with a Gun back in October of 2023, will also be closing their doors. Unlike the Alone in the Dark remake, Wizard with a Gun is sitting at very positive reviews over on Steam, but this wasn't quite enough to save the studio apparently. President and founder of the studio, Patrick Morgan, said on Twitter this week that, despite the promising start of Wizard with a Gun, sales are not strong enough to sustain our studio. Going on to say, I may never get over the irony of spending a decade building my ideal team only for it to end after our most productive year. The dedication, creativity, and hard work of every person on our team have been nothing short of extraordinary. It's sad to see, especially since Wizard with a Gun seemed to be doing so well, but the unfortunate truth is the state of the industry currently is that even if you do well, that's no guarantee of success. Switching gears away from that, Valve is being sued once more, this time in the UK by Vicky Shotbolt, a digital rights activist and founder of Parent Zone, a UK-based parenting organization whose stated goal is to ensure a safer online world for children. The lawsuit itself is being handled by Milberg London LLP, the same firm handling the 2022 lawsuit against Sony, which is still ongoing. The main issues in the lawsuit claim that Sony imposes price parity on publishers and developers that prevent competition, as well as claiming that the 30% cut Steam takes on sales has resulted in inflated prices overcharging UK customers. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I don't even pretend to be one on TV, so I'm going to leave the details to this one up to the experts, but for now, there isn't much to say since the proceedings are just now beginning. As more info comes to light, I'll keep you updated, but if this goes like any of the other lawsuits that Valve has faced, yeah, it's dead on arrival. How about this one for a kick in the teeth? After all the layoffs and BS that EA has gotten up to in the past, well, forever, the execs walked away last year with over $60 million in their pockets. That's right, 5 of them. Walked away with $60 million. With $25.6 million, or almost half of that, going straight to CEO Andrew Wilson himself. To put that in perspective, the median employee income is just shy of $150,000 a year, or 172 times less than that $25.6 million that Andrew Wilson pocketed. And for those of you that know your statistics, you'll know that the median, depending on which way it is skewed, can be very misrepresentative of reality. So if the stat is skewed to the right, you can bet there were plenty of workers earning well below $148K. I've got nothing more to add to that. I just wanted to report on just how much money these people are making off the backs of their overworked and underpaid employees. Do with that information what you will. I sure as hell know what I'll do with it. And lastly, in this State of Industry segment, more bad news. A few weeks ago, we covered Life by U's most recent delay, and in that video, I discussed my concern for the game. There are times it's fun to say I told you so, but unfortunately this isn't one of them. This week, Paradox Interactive announced not only the cancellation of the game, but the full closure of Paradox Tectonic, leaving 24 people without a job. CEO Frederick Wester had this to say about the situation, and stop me if this sounds familiar. This is difficult and drastic news for our colleagues at Tectonic, who've worked hard on Life by U's early access release. Yeah, I'm sure it's really difficult for him. I'm sure things are very hard for the CEO of Paradox Interactive. And yeah, while this is yet another soulless response from the C-suite, there are times when games just need to be abandoned, and it sounds like Life by U found itself in that situation. Still, I refuse to believe that those 24 developers couldn't have been reassigned. Furthermore, this whole situation is the making of Paradox's leadership anyway. But naturally, it's not the leadership that gets punished. Nah, it's the devs who spent years toiling away to make a doomed game, only for the suits to can both the game and the studio before anything came of it. Alright, are we done with the depressing state of the industry? I doubt it, but let's move on and talk about some games. From Software is making the rounds this week, getting their interviews, headlines, and previews out there in the lead up to the Shadow of the Erdtree release. And if anyone, for whatever reason, was worried about the expansion, it's looking pretty safe to lay those worries to rest. Previewers everywhere are practically tripping over themselves to gush about the expansion. For perspective, Dark Souls' Artorias of the Abyss DLC, easily one of the most beloved From Software expansions ever, is sitting at around 89 on Metacritic. But at the moment, the Shadow of the Erdtree is sitting at 96. And yeah, Metacritic absolutely isn't the end-all be-all of review sites, but a 96 is a 96. Video Games Chronicle is quoted as saying, "In some ways, it's better than the original by providing an experience that's both tighter, but also more than double the length we expected." Saying that the DLC is better than the original in some ways is absolutely a bold statement and a pretty clear ringing endorsement for the expansion. Whether or not that specific statement will ring true with everyone isn't all that important when a similar sentiment is basically being shouted by almost all of the previewers. So if I was excited before, and I was, now I'm wondering if I need to be clearing my schedule for the launch. Unfortunately, I can't, but these previewers are making it really hard to accept that. In other FromSoft news, series creator and company president Hidetaka Miyazaki put on his PR hat in an interview with IGN this week, and once again lit a tiny spark of hope. When asked about a potential Bloodborne PC port, something PC players have been begging for since 2015, Miyazaki had this to say. "Obviously, as one of the creators of Bloodborne, my personal, pure honest opinion is I'd love more players to be able to enjoy it, especially as a game that is now coming of age, one of those games of the past that gets lost on older hardware. I think any game like that, it'd be nice to have an opportunity for more players to be able to experience that and relive this relic of the past. So as far as I'm concerned, that's definitely not something I'm opposed to." Naturally, there was nothing committed in this interview, but it was enough to once again inflame the hopes of Soulsborne enjoyers everywhere. One day, maybe. And another Miyazaki W, when asked by PC Gamer about his thoughts on the massive industry layoffs going around, he had this to say. "I think the people at Katawaka, our parent company, understand that I hold this view very strongly. While we can't say 100%, we can't say with complete certainty what the future is going to hold for From and Katawaka, at least as long as this company is my responsibility, that's something I would not let happen. So hopefully our players and fans can take a little bit of reassurance from that." Compare and contrast this with the BS PR speak of other company CEOs who talk about making hard decisions while using words like restructuring and redundancies in a soulless effort to minimize the emotional impact of layoffs on people. And then think about EA CEO Andrew Wilson, who turned around and paid themselves $25.6 million after laying off over 600 people. But enough with harping on the industry, we all know it sucks. What doesn't suck, however, is Elden Ring and its newest expansion, which will finally be released for the rest of us in just a couple days on Friday, June 21st. In some quick Helldivers news, there was a massive patch this week that overhauled many of the game's weapons and stratagems. While there are too many changes to cover here, the TLDR is that a lot of weapons got a balance pass to make them better, while a lot of ship stratagems were also buffed to work in more varied situations. Overall, the community seems happy with the newest patch, which took far longer than usual to implement. That said, there are, as always, still issues to iron out and balance. In other Helldivers news, the most recent order gave divers the choice between saving a children's hospital on an embattled planet versus saving some military equipment, which would have netted the players a new stratagem. Rather than going straight for the new toys to play with, the Helldivers went straight for the trapped children and saved the day. After completing the mission, Johan Paulstedt, the game's face at this point, took to Twitter to announce a $4,311 donation to save the children, with that number being directly tied to the amount of children the Helldivers had saved during the major order. And yeah, that's really cool. The Helldivers community in general just seems to be really awesome. Too bad Sony's on their back. One last bit of Helldivers news, when a Twitter user asked CEO Giorgiani about the possibility of a story mode campaign for the game, Giorgiani replied, "Not happening, sorry bro, that's like building an entirely new game." Considering Arrowhead seemed to be struggling to keep up with the game's current success, expecting them to pivot and start creating an entirely new story campaign is, of course, wildly optimistic. But for those curious, there's your answer. Todd Howard and Starfield made the news this week for a number of reasons, and unfortunately not all of them are good. It all started with the Shattered Space DLC reveal at the Summer Game Fest showcase, which, to be honest, looks pretty good. It's not going to fix most of Starfield's fundamental issues, but it looks cool nonetheless. With the DLC reveal, it was also announced that the Creation Kit was ready to release, and with it would be the newest Creations game section featured in most of Bethesda games at this point. And with the Creations come, of course, paid mods. And naturally, there's the rub. It's not a new problem by any means, but when you're the company that's notorious for horse armor, anytime you pull a stunt like this, you can bet you're going to be called out for it. The issue this time isn't so much that paid mods exist, though there are certainly plenty of players who dislike that model. Rather, the issue is in how you purchase the creations. And again, this also isn't a new issue. For instance, there's a new quest you can buy for about 700 credits or just about $7. And I'm sure you can see where this is going, because if you want to buy that quest, you can't just pay $7, you've got to convert that $7 into 700 credits, but you can't buy 700 credits, you can only buy 1,000, which will leave you with 300 or about $3 just sitting there unspent in the hopes that maybe, possibly, you'll find something else you want for 300 credits? Very unlikely. Predictably, fans revolted and review bombed the game on Steam. Game World Observer paraphrased an interview with Mr. Matty Plays in which Todd Howard addressed the 700 credit microtransaction. Howard specifically mentioned the Trackers Alliance pack, saying that the studio made a mistake with monetization. He said Bethesda will revise the way it delivers such content, adding that their main goal is to support third-party creators by giving them a platform where they can earn monetary reward for their creations. Of course, if a mod creator wants to be paid for their work, that's completely their decision, and Bethesda have been attempting to implement their creation systems for many years now. The problem is that the modding community in general, especially users of mods, are not at all on board with the idea of paid mods. Hell, even most mod authors find the idea completely antithetical to the spirit of modding in general. And then when you pack on a shady currency scheme that causes users to purchase more currency than they actually need, well yeah, you're gonna piss off almost everyone. Not a good look. Annoying business practices aside, Howard did go on to reveal a number of interesting things about Starfield and its future. When asked if the Shattered Space DLC would be the end of Starfield's development, Todd announced that another expansion was already planned and he hoped for more in the vein of annual story expansions. To be honest, this surprised me, given Starfield's somewhat controversial release. I say somewhat controversial because despite the negative attention it received on release, the game has reached over 14 million players with an average playtime of 40 hours per player, at least according to Mr. Howard. And yeah, I can actually see that. I quite enjoyed my time with Starfield, even if it wasn't the space game I was hoping for. In the same interview, Elder Scrolls 6 was even talked about a little. Nothing much was revealed aside from the fact that they are working on the Skyrim sequel, and that the tech behind Starfield will be the starting point for Elder Scrolls 6. And much to the chagrin of gamers everywhere, it will be using the Creation Engine, rather than moving on to something a little bit more modern like Unreal 5. And the Fallout franchise was also touched on a bit. But aside from the fact that any new Fallout game is still 5-ish years away and that there are no plans to remake Fallout 1 and 2, not much else was said. So for the time being, Fallout enjoyers are stuck replaying old games or diving into Fallout 76, which actually did just receive some new content, and to be honest, Fallout 76 is a pretty fun time. Alright, and now it's time for the whirlwind. In this segment, I like to briefly touch on some of the game reveals and other bite-sized pieces of news out there that don't really warrant paragraphs of information. Developer Stormmind Games announced A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead, and if the trailer is anything to go off of, we might have a contender here. Obviously, this one is based on A Quiet Place, the 2018 horror film, and to be honest, this gave me some Alien Isolation vibes. It doesn't seem like the sound-attacking creature can be fought, and with avoiding making sound being the #1 priority to survive, this game has the potential to create some truly tense moments of horror. No concrete release date for this one as it was just announced, but it is listed for sometime later this year on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. Boltgun, the Warhammer 40k boomer shooter, received its Forges of Corruption DLC this week, and it's been met with pretty good reviews. The new DLC includes a new 5-level campaign, new environments, and new weapons and enemies. Furthermore, a new free update for everyone includes a horde mode with 4 levels of difficulty and achievements. On the less exciting end of things, the update also brings bug fixes and improvements, as well as a new guide feature to assist those who get stuck in any of the game's levels. Moving from space marines massacring hordes of Tyranids, we have a cheerleader slaughtering hordes of zombies. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop was originally announced as a remake of the original goofy zombie hack and slash back in 2022, but by 2023, series creator Yoshima Yasuda had scaled the scope down to more of a remaster. That said, the game will feature full HD resolution, better combo action timings, a chained hits hunting system for combat flow, new chainsaws, new costumes and hair colors, more features for Juliet's room, and a time attack mode. The remaster's biggest feature is the Repop mode, which seems to just add pop art style damage effects, which is, I was going to say weird, but this is Lollipop Chainsaw, so I guess that's par for the course. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop launches this September 25th on PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and the Nintendo Switch. Fallen Aces was one of a number of indie games that got my attention at this year's Summer Game Fest, and you can check it out now in early access. I'm just hoping that I'll get some free time soon to play it myself. This neo-noir first-person shooter is set in the 1990s with a neat comic book aesthetic and has some cool-looking immersive sim vibes. Currently, it's at overwhelmingly positive on Steam with over 1,300 reviews as of this writing, which makes me want to get my hands on it even more. Players are praising everything from the audio design and soundtrack to the combat and immersive sim elements, with few people having much negative to say. Of course, this is early access, so as always, just be aware of what you're buying if you plan on checking it out. The Forever Winter will be the first outing by developer Fundog Studios and is described as a third-person co-op tactical survival horror looter shooter. I love that game genres are now getting so convoluted that I have to use 6 different adjectives to explain the game, and even then it probably won't fully tell you what to expect. I do love me some indies. Anyway, I'd recommend checking out the full trailer because if this game can deliver, it's going to be a blast. The core gameplay loop seems to revolve around taking jobs from one of the game's 2 warring factions, sending out into the world to complete said job and loot everything in sight, before returning to your base. Once you're back in your base, you'll be able to customize your rig, the giant backpack that assists you in your scavenging, upgrade your weapons to keep you alive longer, and you can even use a donation box to help other players that may need your help. The aesthetics of the game world look like if the Terminator movies had consulted with Hideo Kojima, and I'm personally a fan of that. And considering the devs had said that the opening scene of Terminator 2 was a huge inspiration for them, yeah, I think they're nailing it so far. Even the deadpan Sarah Connor-ish narration of the trailer sells that narrative vision. Unfortunately, no word on a release date for this one, but I'll definitely be keeping an eye on it. Gears of War E-Day surprised many this past week when it was revealed that the next mainline franchise entry would be a prequel. Press Start got to ask E-Day's creative director Matt Searcy and brand director Nicole Fawcett about developer The Coalition's inspiration for making the prequel. Rather than it being something of a series reboot to consolidate the long-running story, it looks as if this is simply the direction the team wanted to take. And the dark tone of the E-Day reveal, according to both Matt Searcy and Nicole Fawcett, is a good representation of what players can expect in the prequel in general. Rumored to be coming out sometime in 2025, we'll have to wait at least a year before we can find out if going back in time really is the right move for the long-running franchise. Either way, I'll be curious to see just how Gears of War looks and plays in the Unreal Engine 5 when we can finally get our hands on it. Here's a quick one I just wanted to give a nod to. PlayStation announced recently that Discord will finally be coming to the console, so no more depending on your phone or laptop or whatever to have a reliable chat with your squad mates. You'll be able to generate a shareable link from the PS5 to share with your friends via other services as well, which is a nice and frankly overdue addition. Yacht Club Games, the team behind Shovel Knight, is gearing up for their 10-year anniversary, and that means good tidings for gamers. Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope DX, showed off an upgraded definitive edition of the original, and brings with it 20 playable characters, a rewind feature, save states, and more than 300 cheats to play with. On top of that, you'll have access to an online multiplayer mode, challenge stages, custom night, and the Battle Ghost Arena. The Shovel Knight Dig Wicked Wishes DLC is also coming this summer and will be a free update that adds more bosses and quests. If you wanted even more, the Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon Pack will also be free later this summer and will have PC mod support, new challenges, secrets, and playable characters. Unfortunately, the one thing everyone wanted to know more about, the next mainline Shovel Knight game, all we got was the barest hint of a teaser. Yep, that's it. But from everything that was said, plus the 3D logo in the teaser, it's pretty clear that the next Shovel Knight will be moving over into the 3D space, which will definitely be an interesting change of pace. No release dates or anything at this time, but at least we know what's coming up next for Shovel Knight fans. Moving right along, Black Myth Wukong, the Souls-like based on the classic novel Journey to the West, has finally made its way into previewers' hands, and it looks like fans of the genre will have something to jump into after powering through Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. But thinking of it like a FromSoft game isn't the best comparison. For starters, in Black Myth Wukong, you can block projectiles with a dedicated block button and dodge 2 times in a row before having your recovery time increased after the third, kinda similar to Bayonetta. Timing your dodges is also crucial as it ties directly into high damaging attacks you can unleash, and in general, the gameplay is much faster than a traditional FromSoft title. There also isn't a dedicated parry mechanic as such, rather you'll have certain abilities that you can unlock which will give you a similar functionality. Familiar mainstays like stance swapping, magic attacks, and a Sekiro-like level up system do make their way into the game, however. Naturally, you can expect difficult enemy and boss encounters, health potion management, and a bonfire-type rest system, though interestingly enough, you can actually spend skill points outside of the shrine rest stops. All in all, Black Myth Wukong is looking primed to be yet another great game this year, but we'll know for sure this August 20th when it launches on PC and PS5, with an Xbox release being disclosed at a later date. And that's all for me this week, but I hope you'll join me again next Thursday when we take another look at just what the gaming world has in store for us. As fun as it's been to see all the reveals and upcoming games the past couple weeks, I'm definitely looking forward to returning to a normal day in, day out news cycle. So thanks for tuning in, and as usual, I hope you're having a good day. See you later.